Good morning, ninth grade students. We're back today with the book Into the Clouds that we started yesterday. Before I start reading, I want to say thank you so much for being our pioneers, if you will, this year with our online learning. And now everyone at school, everyone in North Carolina, pretty much across the country, every student is experiencing online learning, distance learning, new ways to learn through Google Classroom, Zoom, North Carolina Virtual Public Schools, and more. And I want to tell you how much we appreciate the effort and hard work that you've exhibited from August until now. I do want to remind you again of those 7 habits. Be proactive and begin with the end in mind. You know, I really thought a lot about what's it like to have your first year of high school begin and then abruptly shift into distance learning due to a pandemic. Thought about my 9th grade year of high school. There were challenges in the world, certainly. And the aftermath, I'll say that, the aftermath of the Vietnam War was one of those challenges. The Vietnam War in and of itself, a challenge, and then the aftermath. And this pandemic is creating challenges, and it will also create opportunities for each of you. Tomorrow, before I read, I want to share some leadership insights from John Maxwell. I had an opportunity to participate in a webinar that he conducted yesterday. John Maxwell is considered one of the leading, I'll call it authorities, regarding leadership, really thinking in a visionary way. He's sold, I think it's something like 54 million books worldwide. He's a prolific author, very insightful. And I think some of the things I learned from him yesterday are applicable to you as 9th graders as you continue your journey. So yesterday we started Into the Clouds. This is a fascinating book, and I'm really excited to continue, and I'll tell you where we're going to begin today. We are beginning in part 1, the dirty work. Part 1, the dirty work. This is a photograph of the first American expedition and the individuals who were in the expedition, the very first one. And as you know, excuse me, this is about climbing the 2nd highest mountain in the world. Chapter 1, because it's there. The mountains that held Charlie Houston and his team of climbers high on its slopes was born millions of years ago in a collision that reshaped the face of the earth. The landmass we call India lay far off the southern coast of Asia. As the earth's crust shifted beneath it, the Indian continent edged northward through the ocean. While it traveled, dinosaurs went extinct, an ice age came and went, apes began walking on 2 legs, and evolved into humans. This massive continent plowed into the rest of Asia 50 million years ago, before Houston's expedition. It slowed but didn't stop. One giant landmass ground into another. Over millions of years, the land thrust toward the sky and created the highest mountains on earth. They're known as the Himalaya, abode of snow, in the Sanskrit language of India. and there is nothing on the globe that compares to them. The mountains range along China's border with Pakistan, India, Nepal, and Bhutan. 37 of them tower more than 25,000 feet above sea level. 12 rise more than 5 miles into the sky. The tallest mountain outside of Asia is the 22,841 foot high Aconcagua in Argentina. Move it to the Himalayas and it wouldn't rank in the top 20. Most mountains are of the earth, wrote John Kenneth Galbraith, an American ambassador to India. The Himalayas belong to the heavens. A few thousand years ago, just a sliver in the timeline of a mountain's life, humans began to build homes in the shadow of the Himalayan mountains. They used frigid river water to coax barley and wheat out of the soil. They carried heavy loads through low mountain passes to trade in other lands. They learned to call the mountains home. Never, as far as we know, did they try to climb to the top. Who, after all, would want to? On the high slopes of the Himalaya, there is no such thing as summer. Snow and ice smother massive slabs of rock all year round. Winds whip the summits at speeds over 100 miles an hour. Nothing grows and nothing survives for long. Like Galbraith, the people of the Himalaya were convinced that the high peaks didn't belong to humans. The mountains were the home of the gods, and the gods did not want visitors. In 1830, a British official named G.W. Trall stumbled out of the Himalayas after one of the earliest Western expeditions there. The glare from the snow had turned his eyes swollen and raw. The locals who greeted him decided that the mountain goddess had struck him blind for trespassing. Legend has it she took pity on Trall and restored his sight after he made a cash offering at a nearby temple. Wanderers in the mountains, traders, warriors, and religious missionaries warned about other dangers lurking in the snow and ice. Some people told stories of a giant, two-legged snowman known as Yeti. In the 600s, the Buddhist missionary Wan Zhuang returned to China from a Himalayan journey with this advice. Travelers are often attacked by fierce dragons, so they should neither wear red garments nor carry gourds with them nor shout loudly, he warned. Even the slightest violation of these rules will invite disaster. But gods and mythological creatures weren't the only forces keeping people off the high peaks. Travelers also noticed a more earthbound hazard. People who climbed too high on the slopes got sick. Men's bodies became feverish, they lose color, and are attacked with headache and vomiting. The asses and cattle, being all in like condition, warned a Chinese general in AD 20. In fact, the peaks have been named for their hazards. There was Mount Greater Headache, Mount Lesser Headache, and Fever Hill. Almost 2,000 years after the general's observation, science solved the mystery of Mount Greater Headache. The problem at the very top of the world is that breathing no longer does the body much good. As the mountain slopes rise, gravity fades and releases its pressure. The molecules that make up air, mostly nitrogen and oxygen, float farther and farther apart. Every breath taken at the top of the Himalaya has 1/3 the oxygen of a breath taken on the shore of the ocean. That's not enough to keep a human alive for long. And this is the photo of the Himalaya from the top of a peak in India. In 1953, a Swiss doctor named Edward Wisdenot, drew an imaginary line at 25,500 feet above sea level. Life there is impossible, he wrote, and it requires the whole of a man's will to maintain himself there for a few days. He called this region the death zone. The earth had plenty of unwelcoming places, but humans have learned to live in most of them. Nomadic people inhabit the desert, moving from watering hole to watering hole. A research station sits atop the South Pole, and scientists huddle there through the winter. The high peaks of the Himalaya may be the only land area on the globe where humans simply can't survive. It might as well be another planet. Humans started exploring the Himalayan summits for the same reason they learned to blast themselves into space. They didn't want their enemies to get there first. In the 1700s, the British came to India to make money. Merchants from the British East India Company traded for spices, tea, and textiles in the Himalayan foothills. Before long, they had an army supporting them. British governors took over India from Calcutta to Kashmir, 2,000 miles along the southwestern border of the highest mountains in the world. Right behind the merchants and the soldiers and the governors came the surveyors, eager to stake out the boundaries of the empire. They hired local porters to lug their equipment up the mountainsides. From there, they mapped the valleys and measured the peaks. They even recruited Indian spies, known as pundits, to explore the hidden passes of the Himalaya. Their job was to watch for Russians making their way across the spine of the mountains from the north. In the late 1800s, a new kind of climber arrived in the Himalaya. These men, they were nearly all men, came from Europe and sometimes the United States. On some expeditions, they had surveyors or soldiers with them, but they went to the mountains not to make maps or extend empires. They climbed for the sheer challenge of setting foot on one of the most inaccessible places on earth. If I am asked, what is the use of climbing, said Francis' young husband, who was both a soldier and a mountaineer, I reply, no use at all. No more use than kicking a football about, or dancing, or playing the piano, or writing a poem, or painting a picture. Climbing to the top of the world would elevate the human spirit, he believed. It would prove that humans were getting the upper hand on the earth and acquiring a true mastery of their surroundings. But more often than not, it was the mountains that got the upper hand. That became clear right at the start. In 1895, a British mountaineer named Albert Friedrich Mummery set out to climb Nanga Parbat at the western edge of the Himalaya. Mummery had mastered the rock and ice walls of the Swiss Alps, and when he first saw Nanga Parbat, he was convinced it wouldn't be much harder. He was wrong. Nanga Parbat summit stood 26,600 feet above the sea, more than 10,000 feet higher than any peak in the Alps. Mummery and his climbing partners spent a month trying various routes until the mountain left them one final chance to reach the top, a steep, icy wall called the Rekhat Face. Mummery's climbing partners opted for a safe but roundabout route to the base of the wall, but Mummery was impatient with the mountain. On August 24th, he took 2 Indian porters on a shortcut through a high mountain pass. The 3 men were never seen again. The deaths of Mummery and his Indian companions didn't stop the new breed of mountaineers. 14 peaks in the Himalaya stood higher than 8,000 meters, 26,247 feet, and they became the coveted prizes in a race to the top of the world. Climbers paid for their expeditions in part by selling their stories to newspapers and magazines. Back home, Europeans and Americans devoured the tales of adventure. The names of the mountains rang with mystery: Chauhul, Dalagiri, Makalu, and Gasherbrum. The public was fascinated by the danger. In 1921, the magazine Ladies Pictorial published a breathless article about one of the first attempts on Everest, the tallest mountain of all. Who first faces and triumphs over the intense cold, avalanches, terrific winds, blinding snowstorms, loneliness, and unknown other perils of this mountain of mystery and magic will be forever famous. What an adventure, what a thrilling story to tell. Before running out of exclamation points, the writer added, but alas, what certain sacrifice of life must be made in the effort. Everest had become the great challenge in the Himalaya, and in 1924, a British climber named George Mallory nearly fought his way to the top, but he and his climbing partner vanished 800 feet below the summit. Before his final expedition, Mallory had given a cryptic answer to the question every climber had to field. When a reporter asked him why he wanted to climb Everest, he replied, because it's there. By 1938, none of the 8,000-meter peaks had been climbed. 7 expeditions had attempted Everest and 7 had failed. 12 people had died trying. In 1934, a German expedition to Nanga Parbat had fallen apart in a devastating storm. 9 climbers died trying to make it back down the mountain. Just 2 years later, an avalanche tumbled from the heights of the same peak, smothering 16 climbers in their camp. An article appeared in the New York Times in April of 1938, once again wondering why climbers seemed to be so obsessed with such a dangerous pursuit. Mankind has the notion that he can't rightly claim title to his planet till he's walked over all of its surface that will bear his weight. He has put his heel on the poles, the continental ice caps, the lonely jungles and deserts, and the loftiest peaks of Europe, the Americas, and Africa. The last great unknowns left for him on Earth are the still untrodden mountaintops in the heart of Asia. That article also announced a new expedition, not to Everest, but to the second highest mountain in the world. The peak was about as unknown as any place on Earth. It stood tucked away in the far northern reaches of the Himalaya. It was so hard to get to that only 2 expeditions had even attempted to climb it. The mountain was K2, and the leader of the expedition was a 24-year-old medical student named Charlie Houston. All right, we're stopping there today. We're on page 11. This is a rendering of the summit. So we'll find out what's coming next with Charlie Houston, finishing up tomorrow and into the next chapter. Thanks so much. Hope you have a really good day. Thanks, champions.